The Australian Energy Market Operator says there's an urgent need for emergency powers to switch off or turn down rooftop solar in every state as the grid battles with the output from millions of systems. In its report out today, AEMO has called for the backstop powers to reduce or even shed rooftop solar generation in extreme circumstances. Some states already have the ability to take control of rooftop solar output, but the operator wants it extended nationwide to ensure the security of the grid. Reporter Dan Mercer joins us now with the details from Albany in Western Australia. Hi there, Dan. So what exactly is AEMO looking for here, and why is it calling for that?
Hi, Roz. Essentially what AEMO is seeking, not necessarily on its own behalf, but for the system, is an emergency power. They call it a mechanism, but essentially it's a lever that can be pulled that can reduce the amount of rooftop solar that might be in the system at any one time. And it sort of defines those periods as extremely rare and sort of serious circumstances when there is so much solar but demand for electricity might not be that high. Such that solar output is actually threatening the security of the grid itself. AEMO wants these powers in every state, as you mentioned. They already exist to a certain extent in some places, including South Australia and Western Australia, where I am. And they do, in fact, get used infrequently. But what AEMO is saying is that they need to be there, and the states, with the network poles and wires companies that supply electricity to our homes, need to be able to use them when the circumstances arise or when the circumstances require it.
So what's the significance of these powers, Dan?
Look, it really just alludes to the sheer scale of rooftop solar that's on the system now, Roz. There are more than 4 million rooftop solar installations across homes and businesses in Australia. That's a staggering number. 20 years ago, there were practically none. And collectively, that rooftop solar capacity is enormous. At times, according to AEMO, it's supplying about half, even more than half of the entire demand for electricity on the whole national electricity market, which spans the eastern seaboard at times. In South Australia in particular, sometimes there's so much rooftop solar that they actually are meeting all of their demand from it, and they have to export the rest interstate to Victoria and New South Wales. But that's a sign of what's to come across the country. More and more rooftop solar is going up all the time. AEMO believes that within just a few years, solar could soon be supplying about 90% of demand in the system at times. But the problem is solar, unlike coal and gas-fired power plants, doesn't provide the sorts of system security services that keep the grid stable, that keep it on an even keel. And it's a really high wire act. It needs those services to maintain steady voltage and frequency rates. And we need those things so that the power both stays up and the power that our appliances are using is safe. It's not going to cook them and there's enough juice so that they can actually work.
So how's this going to affect households with solar panels then, Dan? Will they notice a difference in their bills?
Realistically, Roz, probably not. I mean, this is a power, or these are powers that are going to exist for, as a last resort, for use as a last resort. They're not going to be tapped willy-nilly, or so AEMO says. Only in those rare circumstances, typically in spring where we have so much solar but demand is still pretty subdued because we're not running our air conditioners. And even when households might be affected in those rare circumstances, it'll only be for very short periods of time in all likelihood, and so people probably won't notice it. Their exports won't be going to the grid when now, or typically they might, but those exports are really not worth much to households these days anyway. You know, in more extreme circumstances, perhaps they might have their solar switched off entirely. That's not quite clear yet, but in that case, they might be required to buy power from the grid. But usually when this is going to be happening, there's so much solar anyway that those households will be paying really quite low rates for their electricity because there's so much supply.
Daniel, thank you.